Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 308, Early Greek Philosophy. Link in the description to where you can purchase my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links are to my books blogs. It's 77 pages, but keep in mind with traveler's literature like this, which is exactly what it is. This is part of the religion series. I've edited probably 24 works from it. All across a very broad spectrum of material there. Very good series overall. It'd probably fill a small bookshelf in and of its own. But the format in that particular era of time was much less dense than it was maybe 50 years before. 50 years before, people would cram in literally as much as possible per page. Sometimes you'd even have like 2 columns of actual text just to compact it further. And it was massively dense. 50, 60 years later, after the Industrial Revolution, generally, everything's like double-lined and stuff, and so you have to compact it if you're doing it in a modern format. Anyway, this particular work basically goes from the what you could call pre-religious, like the archaic period in Greece, briefly, of course, through the early philosophers up to Socrates. That's where it cuts off. Socrates, definitely the most important figure that it speaks about, one of the most notable philosophers of antiquity. Talks a little bit about, for instance, he never actually wrote down anything. Basically, all we have is secondary reporting on what Socrates said from other people that were his students. Some of it may be embellished or improved by latter-day philosophers, notably Plato. And actually, there's a section in here which I found most interesting on the sophists. Of course, it takes on a pejorative label usually. When we call someone, when you say that they're engaged in sophistry, normally it's a pejorative. We're saying that they're basically grifting. They're bloviating, they're spouting off about high-minded sounding things that they don't really understand, and they're probably doing it for profit. In some way, they've got a personal motive. Initially, though, that term was not a pejorative. It was a philosophical school, and it goes into a little bit of detail about that. You've got all sorts of different philosophers that it speaks of. Again, though, the only one that most people will recognize, unless they're specifically interested in the topic, is Socrates. They'll know about him. Of course, you know, the hemlock drinker, and he was condemned to die, I think on charges of atheism, if I remember correctly, or degeneracy in general. And they voted to kill him, and he could have fled, but he didn't because, you know, he's like, fuck it. No, I've got to obey the state. He was kind of a statist in some ways. Not necessarily my favorite philosopher of antiquity. I don't know. I like Diogenes. I think the dude who lived in a giant wine barrel and told Alexander to get the fuck out of his son. He had some balls. It's funny because Alexander actually respected that. He used to poop in the theater and stuff. Wasn't he the one that plucked a chicken? I think it was Aristotle or one of the others that said that man was basically a featherless bird. And so he plucked a chicken and tossed it into the midst of them and said, "Behold a man." It was considered hilarious. And then he had to revise his theorem, of course. That's not covered here, unfortunately. There should be a whole book on humorous aspects of Greek philosophy, because trust me, there's a lot of them. If you want, though, a basic overview of early Greek philosophy, up through Socrates, from the archaic period where it's more tribal and, you know, talks, again, briefly about sort of before philosophy, people were barbaric and living in darkness. This is definitely a good work. It condenses it very much, but it's also very detailed, especially about the sophists, again, and Socrates, which are two things that are more interesting. It covers some of the lesser philosophical minds as well, like the 7 sages prior, some of those figures, and a lot of persecution, by the way, politically. As well as Homer and some of these other theater people who are involved in performance arts, as well, their sort of view of the gods. The reason that I edited this is because specifically Greek philosophy is overlapped to the point of no return with Greek mythology. That is, the idea of the gods, their natures, statements about the spiritual world really infiltrated every aspect of the philosophical and civic systems of ancient Greek life. So there's a huge religious and spiritual overtone to basically everything that you're reading, and I find that fascinating. Because, I mean, really, that inseparable nature continues through most of human history. It isn't until relatively modern times that you have any real tolerance for philosophical systems that don't directly connote the spiritual world in some way or form, even if just to refute it. having an entirely separate philosophical system from the spiritual is a modern advent, and so I find that interesting. So again, link in the description to where you can find my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books, blogs. This will go under the academic section, obviously. That's about all. Peace out.